Hello and welcome to the Talking NorCal podcast, the official podcast of Active NorCal. I am your host, Zach O'Brien. With me here, as always, it is Bob. Once again, I didn't think of a nickname for you, Bob.
Bob's here.
Bob is here. How you doing today, Bob?
Doing good.
We have a fun show today. We have kind of a famous dude on our podcast, Hank Shaw. He is the creator of Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook, James Beard Award winner, big outdoorsman chef. He specializes in cooking wild food. He's been on CNN. He's been on the show Meat Eater. He's been on the freaking Joe Rogan podcast. So we got a big interview with him coming up. Before we hop into everything, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We are Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, iHeartRadio. We're everywhere. Also follow us on YouTube, both Talking NorCal and Active NorCal. We post our highlights of each episode on video through our YouTube and social media pages. So follow us everywhere. Also, check out the Active NorCal store. I'm sitting here. If you're just listening, I'm wearing my Hella NorCal shirt. Go check it out. store.activenorcal.com. Use the code NorCal to get 10% off your next purchase. We got all sorts of cool shirts and hats and sweatshirts in there. So check it out. Represent Northern California the right way. Let's hop into this episode with the Tahoe's Hella NorCal.
NorCal, we're Hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're Hella NorCal, and there are no salad dudes who kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're Hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're Hella NorCal.
We are just coming off the long 4th of July weekend, and unfortunately, it's early July, and fires are already the big news of Northern California. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like any of them have grown much bigger than they were leading into 4th of July weekend, but they were pretty scary for a while there, especially up in Mount Shasta.
And we're not out of the woods yet.
Sure.
We're still very, very early, and fire season hasn't even technically begun yet. So,
right.
Yeah, scary times. We've talked about it before. Kind of saw this one coming with the lack of rainfall this past winter. But yeah, it looks like they're starting to kind of get control of these big burns.
Yeah, so just a quick update. We're recording this Wednesday morning. This podcast will probably come out Thursday. So things will update after this. But the lava fire just north of Mount Shasta, 25,000 acres. It's now at 70% containment. So that's good. That was probably the scariest of all of them. Just its quick growth, its proximity to Weed, California, and all of those areas and neighborhoods over there. And that was just a weird. There's a lot of pot farms up there where the lava fire was, and they had to arrest 14 different people for not evacuating their pot farm, which I guess kind of makes sense. But these people, these law enforcement have much better things to do than to drag pot farmers out of there. And then one guy was actually shot and killed because he pulled a gun out on a cop telling him to evacuate. So that was a really weird fire in a lot of different ways, and it had this giant plume of smoke that made Mount Shasta look like it was erupting for like 4 days. So luckily the containment has grown significantly on it.
Yeah, the pot farmers that either wouldn't leave or were defending their own land kind of saw that one coming.
Yeah.
I mean, that is their livelihood. That is how they make money. And there have been a lot of people in the past that, dress up as either law enforcement or firefighters and say, you got to get out of here. And they're actually thieves. And so a lot of these pot farmers are weary to trust law enforcement. Maybe they're not even real law enforcement. And so you can kind of see that coming. But yeah.
And that fire was right next to Pluto's Cave. And you remember we took a wrong turn, and there were no trespassing signs with bullet holes all over them. I mean, that is pot growing country out there. So
Wild West.
yeah, I mean, I wonder how many of those properties were consumed by the fire. I don't know. But it's that was just a weird overall fire, and luckily it didn't get as bad. I mean, certainly, some structures were burned, some homes, but it's luckily didn't get much worse. And if you lost your property, I'm sorry for saying that. It obviously was terrible, but I think it could have been worse, especially how close it got to weed and those neighborhoods next to Lake Shastina. Also, the salt fire near Shasta Lake was another big one. But these are both in the Shasta Trinity National Forest. That closed I-5 for 2 days. It took, I believe I read it burned down 14 structures, which are homes most likely, those cabins along Shasta Lake. It's now at a little over 12,000 acres with 25% containment. And what's interesting, if you look at a map since 2018, there's the Carr Fire, the Delta Fire, the Salt Fire, and the Hers Fire. And basically the entire north side of Shasta Lake has burned in the last 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I mean, we see it every year. And, I mean, this year it was 4th of July, so people are out celebrating. It's smoky everywhere. For me, did you see a lot of fireworks stands around town?
Yes.
What is that about?
Well, and not only that, I heard fireworks all night. Now, we're in an urban area. There's not going to be a wildfire, but nonetheless, I mean, the optics of lighting off fireworks at this time of year is insane to me.
My apartment complex had their own fireworks show, and I had no idea how that's possibly legal. I mean, there is a fireworks stand right down the street. I assumed they just sold like sparklers and maybe firecrackers, but there were full-on mortar, as fireworks as you get, just for sale right next to the street.
It was both Saturday the 3rd, Sunday the 4th, and Monday the 5th.
I heard some last night.
It was constant. I heard some last night as well. It was constant, just people lighting off illegal fireworks, and I felt like the old man going out, shut the hell up.
What pissed me off the most is the next morning how nobody picked up their trash.
Ugh.
It's come on. My complex did. I think somebody took it upon themselves to clean up the hundreds. There must have been firework packaging all around. But I did go around my neighborhood and I did notice that there was a lot of littering. So, number one, fireworks are very dangerous. Number two, pick up your damn litter.
I just don't. Just once again, the optics of everything going on right now, people losing their homes, all this stuff burned, and the conditions are not great, and they're going to get worse throughout the week. And the fact that you're lighting off fireworks, it means, I guess you don't read the news or whatever.
I just don't know how it's legal to do so. I mean, I know it's not.
Well, those big ones are illegal.
But they got to be getting the stand, which is wood, by the way. It's this wood shack that, you smoke a cigarette and 30 feet away, and you have everything going up in flames. But clearly no one's regulating that.
Well, I read, and I'm just going off the top of my head here. I read there was some guy in Humboldt who was arrested. They found $1 million of illegal fireworks in his house. He's dealing fireworks. So there's ways to get them, whether you're getting them out of state or whether you are buying them illegally. But just, why are we doing this? I don't understand. Continuing with the fires. By the way, the salt fire at Shasta Lake, I actually got some notes from some businesses out at Shasta Lake, because I think they're having some issues. People think, one, the lake is empty, which, yes, it is low, but it still has hundreds and hundreds of miles of shoreline. It's a big, big lake. So Shasta Lake's still going strong. And so these businesses were basically saying, come on out. The smoke's not that bad. But I just wanted to mention that because both with the fires and with the low, I think those businesses are struggling with perception mostly. So I just want to mention that. Also, Plumas National Forest, the Beckworth complex fires burning. That has some bad movement going on with it right now, and that's a newer one. What's funny is the term Beckworth we'll mention later in the podcast. So we'll talk about it later why that could be a big deal. There's the Juniper Fire in Modoc County, which is nearly 1,000 acres, 15% contained. That is way up in, very rural land. I'm sure there's some houses out there, but it's very little. So those Modoc fires aren't as dangerous as some of the others. And then Yosemite. Yosemite had 14 lightning-caused wildfires burning throughout the weekend in the park. The King Fire is the biggest. It's currently 10 acres. A lot of those lightning fires, they simply just watch them. They put like a camera on them and just make sure they don't get out of control because they usually just die out. I mean, that wilderness area is so big. But 14, there's just a ton of lightning.
The big rocks in Yosemite is what attracts all the lightning, right? Like,
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure that's if you're like hiking Half Dome and it's lightning, well, first of all, you have the metal cable that you have to worry about, but there's a lot of metal in rock. So I think that those large rocks tend to attract lightning.
Yeah.
So there's probably been hundreds and thousands of years of lightning hitting that area, so it's kind of used to burning itself out.
Well, if you think about it, last year's major fire season was mostly caused by lightning. It was those big ones, the CZU, the LZU, all those, I think the August complex, they were all started by lightning. So, yeah, I mean, we're just got to hope that we don't have these huge lightning storms because this year could be worse than last year's historic season. And we've talked about it a million times, but it's always worth mentioning that this year we will probably break the record again.
Rain dance!
Yeah, we need rain. And I don't think it's going to come anytime soon. We need it earlier this year, come fall, winter. But it's not looking good, and it's early July. Usually this stuff doesn't start until at least late July. And, we're already on pace to pass last year's record. And so, but these lightning storms could be the cause of it.
Right, you see clouds rolling in, and you're like, great. And then it's lightning instead of rain. It's like, this is the opposite of what we need.
Right.
I was on the news this morning, and I talked about rain dance. I hope that's not like an offensive thing that I say rain dance, because I said it on the news this morning. But I was like, we all just need to rain dance. We need rain here in Northern California, and it's nice that we were able to kind of get ahead of these fires that started this last week. But yeah, we have a long road ahead of us this year.
Well, this upcoming week is supposed to be super, super hot. It's supposed to get back into these fire conditions that, made these fires erupt last weekend. So, who knows what's going to happen, but it's tough. It's tough to deal with. This is the summer we're going to see ahead, and it could be historic. So everyone be careful out there. Don't light any fires.
Well, should we get to the news of the week?
Let's do it.
All right, first story. This is kind of a big and potentially controversial topic. Lake Tahoe tourist shoots and kills. Well, shoots a charging bear. It did end up dying, but not because of that particular shot.
Yes. So this is controversial, and this was actually, it went pretty viral on our website this weekend. So there's this guy. He has a vacation rental in Myers, which is just west of South Lake Tahoe, and it is disputed. Well, it's questioned whether he actually left the door open or whatever. But a bear gets into the home, and he comes home, hears the bear roaming around, grabs his pistol, walks upstairs, and again, we are just going off of what this guy said, but the bear charged at him, got on top of him, and the guy shot the bear in the head. The bear ran off. They found the bear the next day and euthanized it. So there's, for one, you can't fault the guy for shooting the bear if he felt his life was in danger.
He literally said the bear was on top of him.
On top.
And then there's no better time to shoot a bear than when it's literally physically on top of you.
Correct. But there are, the bear people up in Tahoe take issue with anything that happens with a bear that goes bad. Did he leave the door open? That's one thing that he should not have done. Did he walk into the home and trap the bear? And did the bear feel trapped and try to go out the way it came?
Well, I didn't know it was upstairs.
Yeah.
That's a new information to me.
Yeah.
That is more of a trapped situation. I mean, this isn't a perfect scenario. Nobody is happy about this story, right? So, but what people are criticizing is this guy's decision making in that occasion.
Right. And look, you hear something upstairs, you grab your pistol. Is it a bear? Is it a human? Who knows, right? So you get maybe into a hallway and the bear comes out at you. I guess you can back away slowly or whatever, but really I could see him being in a situation where he can't move, the bear can't move, and they're not on purpose by any means. They have to come to blows, the man is fully within rights to shoot the bear, even though, of course, if he did leave the door open and if he did corner it, it sucks for the bear, it sucks for everyone, but when it comes push to shove, you gotta protect yourself. And then they did this full investigation where the blood marks and all the evidence points to his story being true. But that doesn't stop, bear people from saying he's a piece of shit and, he did everything wrong. And so it is controversial. My whole thing is let's not tell the guy he's a terrible person. Let's use this opportunity to teach people how to keep bears from your home, what to do if they are in your home, so on and so forth.
I loved your opinion piece about this. First, the big mistake I think that everyone can almost agree on is that the bear got in, and the bear didn't have a key. So there was an easy way to get into this cabin, right? Now, you wrote in this opinion piece that, while that's not smart, it's not illegal.
Right.
And also another really good point I think you made in this is this guy didn't want a bear in his house.
Right.
He just wasn't asking to come home.
He wasn't
to
trying
a
to
bear.
trap it.
The bear
Yeah.
wasn't, and the bear expert in this article was talking about how the bear knows it's not supposed to be there. The bear is in another den, basically, in its mind. And so when it hears other things, it knows that it's probably not in a good place. One of the facts that stood out to me in the article was the fact that this was a pretty large bear. It was larger than
400
average,
to 500 pounds.
which in this article they explain how probably means that it's eating a lot of human food. So it's more used to those human-like environments, those human dens.
They don't typically grow to be that big in the wild. So evidence is showing that bear is used to consuming human food.
Also, to me, what stood out is a bear of that size tends to be, whether male or female, alpha tends to be, if another bear approaches it, it's like, no.
Yeah.
And I can see the bear feeling that way a little bit, feeling cornered and feeling like it's fight or flight, but there's no flight. So here we go to fight.
Right.
I do love the fact that the law enforcement have completely corroborated this guy's story. They're like, listen, no, there were no cameras, but all physical evidence points to this guy telling the truth. He wasn't hunting bear. He was in his cabin in his own rights, and he shot the bear in the head, and it still got away, which is fascinating to me. But they did find it the next day. They followed, they tracked it with the blood and what have you, and they did have to euthanize it, which is terrible, and that's why everyone is criticizing this man. But I mean, what would you do? If you're in the same situation as that guy, tell me you would make different decisions. And hindsight is always 20/20.
If there's a human in your house, no matter the reason, you're legally allowed to shoot them. So are we valuing a bear's life over a human's life? I don't think we should. But some people wouldn't agree with me. I guess my issue came with the Bear League, Tahoe's Bear League, which is this huge organization who educates and protects bears, and they help deal with wildlife for all bear issues, really. And I think they do a really good job in a lot of ways. But they also sort of take the bear side in some of these situations. They posted on their Facebook page that they had talked to one of the investigators and learned all this stuff, and they don't believe the guy's story. And they're just going off hearsay, whereas the wildlife investigators gave a quote that says, the guy's don't victim blame here. This guy is a victim, and he was using self-defense.
They're vilifying the victim, and that's
right.
It's absurd, and I totally agree with you on that.
And I guess my problem with them saying all this stuff is that they are victim blaming instead of educating, right? So it's like, don't say this guy sucks, this guy. Just say, okay, here's what he could have done wrong, that since this has become a very, popular story, that we should use it to educate. Doors locked, put food away, put trash in, bear-proof receptacles. There's all these things that he could have done. By the way, if there's a bear in the home, don't corner it. Don't go find it. If you hear it, be loud, scare it out, and leave the entrance they came in open so it can run out, because it's going to know where it came in. So it drives me nuts, because these people do really good work in helping bears and making sure that they, I guess, quote unquote, have rights, so that they're not just killed every time they make a mistake. They are wild animals, but at some point, some of these bears are just are making mistakes, and they are putting people at risk, and you have to admit that. And that was my whole problem with it. But this type of stuff is bound to happen with all these bears getting big, and so when you advocate for them so much, this population gets bigger, and these more and more of these things are going to happen.
We are a pro-animal, especially indigenous animal podcast. And so obviously, again, this is not a positive story for anybody, but what we want to emphasize is, don't victim shame here. Use it as a learning. I mean, I literally learned some things in reading this. I guess I'd never thought about leaving the door that they came in open, because that's what their natural... I mean, it makes sense to me. I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
If I was this guy and walked into a cabin, I think it'd be pretty clear that it's not a burglar, it's a bear, because they would have trashed everything, you know what I'm saying? And so he should have, if he didn't, and I don't know that he didn't, leave somehow they were cornered, and this guy had a bear on top of him, and he had to shoot him. So we hate that the bear is dead, but stop victim shaming here.
Right. Yes. And it's also so say you're on vacation and you have a million things going on. You got plans here, you're going to the beach here, you're hiking this, whatever. And maybe you had a couple beers, maybe you're doing this and that. And sometimes, these bear stuff just isn't top of mind at all times. And so we just need to keep reminding people how to deal with it in Tahoe, and I get why, say you're visiting from somewhere else and you think, oh, there's a person breaking into my house and stealing my stuff. But in Tahoe, probably bear break-in to human break-ins are 10-1, right? Bears just break in a lot in Tahoe. So you just have to know where you're at, know what you're dealing with. And I don't blame the guy for grabbing his pistol, but
I think that was the right move. I mean, grabbing the pistol was a good idea. The guy might be dead if he didn't do that.
I'm just telling, these bears are skittish. They're not attacking you in your home. If you're really loud and you let their pathway out of the house, they're out of there quick. So, tough story all around. Sucks that the bear was eventually euthanized. Crazy that this bear got shot in the head and didn't die. Crazy.
They got big heads.
These bears are, yeah. But just a fascinating story, a good educational opportunity. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, next story is a pretty positive one, especially with everything that's going on right now. Popular Big Sur Trail reopens following 13-year closure.
It is positive, but it leads me in a negative direction, and I'll explain. It's the Pfeiffer Falls Trail in Monterey County, and it was burned by the Basin Complex fire of 2008. That fire burned over 160,000 acres, and it's one of the biggest wildfires in California's history. Shocking that it comes from 2008, because I thought all the biggest wildfires in California's history happened within the last 3 years. It took 13 years for them to reopen this. And this is why it's sad in a way, because we not only have we seen a lot of these great trails burn over the last couple of years, but they could burn again this summer and continue to do, knock on wood, hopefully not in the following years. But they're, Save the Redwood Leagues was huge in helping renovate this. They did a full restoration of this pedestrian bridge. And it is a great story, but again, you look at like Big Basin redwoods, which are right nearby, which burn, that those might not open for a decade, which is really sad.
Yeah, it's good to see these things reopening. 13 years closed. Honestly, what shocked me is the fact that it's been closed for 13 years. It's only 3/4 of a mile. It's a small trail. 3/4 of a mile to a waterfall sounds like a pretty sweet little round trip to me. Very quick, easy one. Couple $1 million to restore this. Hopefully people are utilizing that and enjoying it. I've never been on this trail personally.
Yeah, me neither.
But yeah, I mean, you talked about this, the fire, the basin was 162,818 acres. I mean, we had a 1 million acre fire last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy that that's still like.
Well, my guess is it was the bridge, and it's this 70-foot bridge that it looks as if it is, the safety of this bridge is rather important, and that I don't even know the land around it has to be strong in order to be safe.
Well, it looks like it's a wood bridge too, so
right.
they clearly burned down in that fire.
But we look at the Carr Fire in Whiskeytown, and the Brandy Creek Falls Trail is still closed. And they don't expect that to open until at least summer of 2022. So as these we look at, I don't know what happened with the lava fire up at Mount Shasta, how far that actually got, but I wonder if you can get to Pluto's Cave right now. Now there's no infrastructure like bridges or anything, but these areas can be really dangerous after a fire, loosened trees and everything. So these fires are it's a rebuilding process for the forest, and I understand that. But when these areas burn in an uncontrolled setting, it creates a danger, and it makes it so we can't visit them anymore. So this is great news, and this is a great hike, the Pfeiffer Falls Trail in Big Sur, but it might spell bad news for our future moving forward.
So I wasn't planning on talking about this, but what the hell? A couple days ago, I found this new show on Netflix that I hadn't seen before, and it was basically about a logging operation in Canada. And I'd never seen it produced kind of like the Mike Rowe shows, those kind of like outdoor, really well produced, if you ask me. But it, to me, kind of taught me a lot about logging and the benefits that come from it. This guy rented a claim from the government to where he had, I think, 2 years to clear out every tree in this area, every single tree. And any tree that he left behind, he was charged for. So he owned a lumber mill. So his crew cut down these trees and hauled them back to process them and sell the actual lumber. The amount of space that this guy had to work with was not, I want to say it was like it was like 8 acres, I want to say. Not a big area, but it took him almost 2 years to log this. And when it was gone, this whole area is surrounded by trees, but this one area is clear. And I guess I had such a negative opinion about the logging industry growing up in Northern California. And there used to be a lot more not so positive ways of actually falling an entire lumber field, if you will. But we definitely can use this in Northern California. I mean, we're using goats, for Christ's sake, to like clear out areas for fire. I opened my eyes to how logging is absolutely something that can be beneficial. We're still using wood, so it's got to come from somewhere, and it just opened my eyes to this. So
have you heard of the Collins, the company who they own these major forests, and they're loggers, but they are environmentally friendly loggers. And they own the Collins Almanor Forest, which is right near Lake Almanor. It's like 100,000 acres almost. And I did a lot of research on them because they just closed down their entire public forest because of wildfire. They don't want their entire property burned up by idiots coming in and burning stuff. But their entire mission is to environmentally friendly logging, so to speak. So
love that.
Yeah. So and obviously not every logging company does that, but they there are ways to do it where we can do these good burns, these responsible burns through these areas, and also responsible logging, which are environmentally friendly, and they help for fire mitigation.
One of the things that I also didn't really realize is that they'll be standing next to a 100-foot tall tree that looks as healthy as any tree I've ever seen in my entire life. They'll cut it down, and the inside will have a big hole in it because it would have rotted. That is an even more flammable tree that they can now use into lumber and plant a tree that is less flammable because it's not got a rotting inside, and so there's benefits to cutting down old trees and planting new ones in certain areas.
Well, you've seen these videos that we've posted of these guys, these firefighters cutting trees in half, and they're burning from the middle inside. Like these fires come through, and it doesn't look like the tree's burnt, like it's charred a little bit, but it's still standing, and you cut it open, and there are flames bursting out of it. It's kind of crazy. And I know beetles have been a big problem for forests in Northern California. They just eat away the wood, and they weaken them, making them more susceptible to
more
wildfire.
flammable, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of issues here, but fire, man.
Happy to see this trail reopened.
Correct.
Okay, next story. We kind of hinted at it earlier. We are a pro-animal podcast. This is a positive story. Brand new wolf pack discovered in Northern California's Plumas County.
So we talked about the Beckworth complex fire currently burning in Plumas, the Plumas National Forest. I suspect that fire is burning where this new pack was recently discovered. It's called the Beckworth Pack. The Beckworth Pack at the Beckworth complex fire. Anyway, 3 wolves, one of which they know is from the Lassen Pack, the 2019 litter of the Lassen Pack. They don't know necessarily where the other 2 came from, but it is. We have 3 wolf packs essentially now in Northern California, which last year we only had 1.
In 2017, we had 0.
Correct.
So it's great that we're getting a little bit more wolfy in this area. This was originally a wolf from Oregon, moseyed its way down here. It's 2. There is technically a third, not pack, but group of wolves.
It's a pair.
Right.
Is what the whaleback pair.
Right. There's 2, and they add 1. It's a pack,
which is a male and a female. So they think they're gonna, but that whaleback pair is probably in an area that was burned in these recent fires as well.
Yeah, but they're pretty. I mean, unless that they were trapped. I mean, they're pretty evasive.
Yeah, I guess the question remains whether these wolves are they're going to move, whether they move south or, the whaleback pair, which is in Siskiyou County, they may have moved north back up to Oregon, right? So then they're not a California wolf pack or whatever. But it's fascinating because the 2-year-old in this new pack, the Beckworth pack, the 2-year-old female from the Lassen pack. The Lassen pack has had 22 pups. That pack right there is completely replenishing the wolf population in California, which is, as we've discussed a million times, very controversial. And you know, we used to have the Shasta pack, but they disappeared. A lot of people think that they were, you know, killed by someone and gotten rid of. So I mean, this is 3 wolves. Unless it doesn't look like they're going anywhere, unless the fire scared them off. So this could potentially be another pack that will start putting off offspring, and you know, and being another producer, much like the last pack.
California wolves are back, baby.
They're back, and you say it like that, but there are some people that are not happy about this.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Screw those people.
And like we've always said, they need to find a way where ranchers are able to protect their cattle or are financially reimbursed for any, because there are some incidents that happen where cattle is eaten by these packs, which only makes sense. There's also the wolf that went all the way down to San Luis Obispo, and they lost it for a while, and then they found it again. It's somewhere in like Central California area. Who knows? So there's a lot of wolf movement, which, like you said, 2 years ago, it really wasn't happening. Well, probably more like 3 or 4 years ago, really wasn't happening at all. So, and it's kind of cool how they can track all these people, all these wolves, and they do a lot of DNA analysis of them to see what's going on.
They collar them so they can keep track of where they are.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to see what's happening in Idaho and Montana, who are killing their wolf populations. They just passed laws that says they're done with wolves. They're going to kill them off. So this wolf stuff is pretty controversial for anyone who follows it. Obviously we don't want too many of them, but I think they're pretty cool.
Totally agree. Love to see it. Okay. Last story about a couple brothers. Brothers break record for long. Okay, we're starting that one over. Brothers break record for longest slackline in California's history.
Moses and Daniel, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Monterrubio.
I like that.
They live in San Francisco, went out to Yosemite National Park, and stretched a slackline 2,800 feet across the valley, over like a 1,600-foot drop, and walked it, and got some incredible photos of the whole thing, and broke the record for longest slackline, which the record that they broke actually happened in Folsom. This guy walked from bridge to bridge along the river there. So this is pretty cool. I know I think it took him like a week to set up this slackline. This was not an easy project.
Yeah, they talked about how the walking the slackline was the easy part. It was actually setting up the slackline that was the hard part. I was thinking about it this morning. Like, would I ever do this? No, I would never do this. And what's great is that they fell a bunch of times, but they were totally safe with it. They had all the proper safety equipment and were ready for it. And there were like 4 or 5 of them that just like were casually slacklining the 1,600-foot slackline, which is so incredible to me. I've tried to balance on a slackline that was like 15 feet, and that's difficult. So I can only imagine this one. Great story. And my favorite part was the wedding pictures from the wedding photographer.
Yeah, so I first found out about this because there is this, and I don't have her name in front of me. I don't know if you do, but she's a loping. Is that what you call it?
Erica Hauk.
Erica Hauk. She photographs weddings in Yosemite, and she calls it like she's of the lopers in Yosemite, and she gets these great photos of people who like hike up to points and get married in Yosemite, which I think is like a growing trend. And So they go up to the spot and they're doing the ceremony, and right behind them are these guys, 1,600 feet above the ground on a slack line. So she photographed them while they were doing it, and it's actually some pretty cool photos.
Yeah, the pictures of like the guy dangling upside down who'd clearly fallen, and they're literally having like a wedding meeting is great. I mean, all the photos are awesome. She did a great job editing them as well. The lighting was great. She had a good golden hour there. The pictures are absolutely iconic. I'm sure that they're going to come out with some kind of like a GoPro video at some point. But yeah, I would never do this.
Yeah, I don't know where you could break this record. The record length in the U.S. is 3,200 feet, so they came about 400 feet away from that. But it's like, where can you get 2 points? Like, you'd have to go to the Grand Canyon or something, to beat this. Like, I don't know where you could beat this in California, just because like in Yosemite, you have this valley that comes up. But yeah, an amazing accomplishment. I not something I would ever do.
Looks like they had a blast, though. It really does. The pictures are absolutely iconic, and for the rest of their lives, this guy can be like, yeah, you see that little dot? That's me.
Yeah, he's just a dot in the middle of the valley. And they had their GoPro camera as well, which is pretty cool. But, people that are into this stuff and pushing the limit, I'm always supportive of that. So
congratulations to these brothers. From one brothers to another, congratulations.
To the Monterrubio brothers, yes.
23 and 26 years old. That's why they had the balls to do it.
Well, that's why they had the energy to do it.
That's true, too.
Yeah.
And that does it for the news of the week.
Okay, that does it for the news of the week. Now let's hop into our really cool interview. We have Hank Shaw. He is the founder of Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook. His website, he's a James Beard Award winner, and he has his most recent cookbook out, Hook, Line, and Supper, a NorCal native. Let's welcome on Hank. All right, we'd like to welcome on a very special guest now. He is a chef, an outdoorsman, a podcaster, a media personality, and an author who has written 4 books, including his most recent, Hook, Line, and Supper. And his website, Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook, won him a James Beard Award. We'd like to welcome on now Hank Shaw. How's it going, Hank?
Good. Thanks for having me on. But it is actually 5 books, not 4.
Oh, 5. I'm sorry. It's you have
no problem.
You have so much stuff on your website. It's insane to go through it. You have over, I think, 1,000 recipes on there.
I do.
I did a little research, and I know you kind of began as a journalist. How did your journey go from becoming this journalist in your younger years to this popular author and sort of this wild foods influencer?
Well, I mean, the chefing and the cooking and the wild food actually long predates my time in journalism. I was kind of born and raised in a family that was very interested in wild edible plants and things. And I've been fishing since the beginning. It is true that I didn't pick up hunting until I was an adult, but I had this kind of need and love for being outdoors and for working with wild foods from the time I was really a little kid. And then I worked in restaurants for a bit before I was a newspaper reporter. So that kind of gave me a really good foundation. And then I did my thing for about 18 years, covered mostly politics and journalism. And what happened is, as you may or may not notice, politics has gotten considerably uglier in the last 10, 15 years. And combined with the fact that newspapers have become a lot less influential, I got laid off in 2008. And then I stuck around in the business for another 2 years, but I have been doing Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook full time since 2010, and I have never missed a mortgage payment. So I'm pretty happy about that.
That's great. You went from politics, which is full of sort of bullshit, right? And then you go out into the wild where there is no bullshit, right? There's a purpose for everything and a use for everything. How did you sort of, when did that light bulb switch in your mind where you were able to say, okay, let me take this writing that I've learned and turn it into my passion?
It happened, towards the end of my career as a newspaper reporter. There was a guy named Johnny Apple, and he was a very famous, originally political reporter for the New York Times. And then he too got tired of politics, but this was in the 70s. And then he decided that he was going to be a food writer, and he became one of the New York Times' best food writers. So I'm like, I bet I could be the poor man's Johnny Apple. And so I started to test the waters of food writing in the early 2000s. And I very quickly realized that I had way more ideas and things that I wanted to write about than I could ever sell in magazines. So I started Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook in 2007. And it's been kind of a going concern ever since. And, it's evolved over the last 14 years. And, but it's become kind of the hub of what I do in terms of all kinds of recipes and experimentation with wild foods.
So why wild foods? Why this passion for foraging and for gardening and for hunting and fishing and turning that into food instead of just, say, going to the grocery store and picking that up and cooking from there?
It really has to do with the fact that the original URL for the website is honestfood.net. So what I was looking for is honest food, and it doesn't have to be wild, but what it ended up being was my niche, or what I was best at, was working with all the things that you can't buy in the store. I'm a good gardener, but I would say that there's lots of people who are better gardeners than I am. But I found my strength in gathering wild plants and mushrooms and fishing and wild game. So I figured I'd go to my strength and offer people and, offer something to the general human debate that wasn't necessarily being offered anywhere else.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to go out and both find or hunt or fish for your food instead of just going to the grocery store, right?
It is, and the exchange of time for money is kind of valuable in human experience if you think about it. So most of us spend an enormous amount of time in front of the computer screen, either the one in your pocket or the one at your office or whatever. And the connection to nature and what I always like to talk about is that you need to be on the stage. You can't just look at the show. I mean, looking at the show is quite nice, especially if it's a place that you're never going to go. But you can never really appreciate nature until you have some skin in the game. And the easiest way to do that is to work with nature to bring home dinner or bring home a snack or make pies or whatever. And so it became extremely important in terms of the macro view of what I do, is to help people put nature back in their lives and put it back in their kitchen.
Awesome. So we're a Northern California podcast, and you live here in NorCal. And actually, it was fun doing research for this podcast because you've been on all sorts of shows, sort of highlighting the different hunting and fishing experiences and the different gardening you can do here in NorCal. What's your favorite animal to hunt in this region?
Ducks. Hands down, ducks.
Why is that?
This area is arguably, you could make an argument that has some of the best duck hunting in the United States. And even no one can argue that it's not great duck hunting. It's phenomenal. It's got some of the best public land for duck hunting in the United States. There's lots of private places that you can, if you got an invite, you can go. The habitat is great. I mean, if you're a hunter in this part of the world, you're crazy to not be a duck hunter because the hunting is that good.
So that's your favorite to hunt. Is that your favorite to cook and to eat?
I would say yes, but mountain quail are a close second. So the mountain quail of the Sierra Nevada and the coastal range are pretty special, but it's not like you don't fill the freezer with mountain quail. You get like a dozen a year, maybe. Right.
I'm curious about your cooking style, specifically with the hunting, because when you're talking about meat in general, people don't necessarily like a gamey meat, right? They don't like the gamey flavor of a meat. Do you typically tone down those gamey flavors in your cooking, or is it something you sort of lean into?
So gamey means different things to different people. So to anybody who has any kind of connection to the wild world, gamey means you messed it up. Like gamey means that the meat is off somehow, or it was a nasty rutting buck, or it got too hot, or whatever. Gamey is an off flavor. So for civilians who are maybe not connected to the wild world, gamey means something that wasn't finished on corn. Kind of period, full stop. Because every meat you buy in the store, with very few exceptions, is finished on some kind of corn mixture. So it all develops the exact same flavor profile. And so when you hunt animals that are not finished on corn, a great example for that many people listening to this can understand is grass-fed beef. Grass-fed beef is not finished on corn. So people are like, oh, it's gamey. Like, no, it tastes like beef actually should taste, where it's not this flaccid, flabby, boring, Cheerios type flavor that pretty much every domestic meat that you buy is just loaded with. It's terrible. So that's why you're seeing more people care about heritage livestock at farmers markets, because they're finished in different ways that produce a much, much superior meat. So the answer to the gamey question is, God willing, the creek don't rise, don't ever have meat that's gamey, like off or rotten or rutting or gross. But yeah, I mean, if it tastes of acorns or if it tastes of whatever, yeah, you're going to taste it in my cooking, because that's what I want you to taste, because it's real flavor.
That's fascinating. So essentially, and not to you sort of lean into it, which that's actually really cool. What about fishing? I'm big into fishing, and I've seen you do some fishing stuff in your content. What are you more of like an ocean fisherman?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I have a choice between fresh and salt, I'm always going to go salt.
And what do you typically say you're on the Northern California coast here? What are you typically fishing for?
The things, all of the things. I mean, if you can catch it, I'll fish for it. And I mean, everything from surf perch to albacore. But, I mean, it's the same thing that you guys all know. It's rockfish, it's lingcod, it's salmon, it's California halibut, striped bass. That's, your stock and trade day in and day out. Leopard sharks a couple times a year.
What's your favorite to cook with?
They're kind of all my children. But, like, if I had to pick the two California fish, we're kind of bleeding into SoCal here too, but it would be yellowtail and white sea bass. And you can catch white sea bass here in NorCal.
Oh, and are you mostly off like the Sonoma, Mendocino coast?
No. I mean, I fish out of San Francisco Bay mostly.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Emeryville, Berkeley, that kind of place. Bodega also.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess you talk about they're all your children, but do you have a preference as far as like hunting and fishing? Do you prefer, catching?
The actual fishing, the actual catching, I'm not too proud to say that I'm probably one of the best bottom fishermen you will talk to. That's what I'm good at. That's what I've been doing for the better part of 50 years, all over the world. Everybody says, oh, no, it's just any talking chimp can fish off the bottom for rockfish. And you're right. You will catch fish, but I will always catch more fish than you, because I've just done it for more places and with more gear and for more species over more years than a lot of people. And so, sure, have I met people better than me? You betcha. But I'm pretty good at that. And I love doing it, because what I love about bottom fishing is you extend your consciousness through the line into the lures or the bait or whatever, and you can, over time, you get a visual picture of what's going on the bottom. Like, I can feel the difference between whether the sinker is on stone or metal or mud or sand. I can feel what's happening down there, and I love that kind of active fishing. Whereas I love salmon, don't get me wrong, but salmon trolling is not my favorite style of fishing.
It's not. There's not much to do with it, right? And I come from a fly fishing background where you're constantly working, and we actually went salmon fishing on the Sacramento River last summer, and you sort of put it out there and wait, right? And it's totally goes against what I was taught and what I experienced growing up fly fishing.
For sure.
So I saw you on the show Meat Eater. I'm a fan of that show, and it was really fun to see you sort of in the hills, and you guys got wild pig and deer. What's it like shooting a show sort of that magnitude? Does it feel like is it like a major production? Because you're out in the wild. What was it like shooting that episode of Meat Eater?
I mean, first of all, that the show is not that. I mean, it's not a show of magnitude at all. I mean, it just isn't. I mean, it's important in the niche for sure, and I like the show, but it's nothing like. I mean, I did a show with CNN also in NorCal with Mike Rowe.
With Mike Rowe, yeah, I saw that.
That was a production. Like, there's a huge difference between the way a network like CNN shoots a show versus Meat Eater. I mean, with Meat Eater, it was Steve, it was a guy named Dan Doty, and it was Giannis Patelis, and that's it. Like, it's basically the Steve and I were the only two not holding a camera, and it was just like a hunt with two guys with cameras. I mean, that's all it was. I mean, in terms of the actual experience shooting it, it was, it was not that big a deal.
You're talking to a millennial here, so like I see Meat Eater as sort of a more influential show with my, with who I am and the people I associate with, whereas none of my friends really watch the shows on CNN, So I guess that's why I say, it's popular. It has this huge reach. But I had a feeling
that's different from the production. You asked me about the production.
Sure. Yeah. So so on Meat Eater, you sort of were just followed around with a single camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting because that's sort of what we do. We sort of follow each other around with one camera, and I think that's sort of where a lot of the media is going these days. Finishing up with sort of this wild food topic, your garden. I'm curious about your gardening. Like what's your garden like at your home?
Well, we live in a quarter acre just outside of Folsom, and the coolest thing about it is that when you own your house, you can do whatever you want to the land. And so I have taken a very strict policy that there are a few exceptions. There's a gardenia that predates us that Holly has demanded to survive, but pretty much everything else on the landscape pays its rent. It's edible or it's medicinal or something. So I managed to create a lawnless front yard that has drought tolerant plants that like manzanita berries, and you can eat the manzanita berries. And so the landscaping itself kind of contributes to what I do, but the garden, the actual tilled garden, my philosophy for this, and I think this is a really good philosophy for really anybody listening to this, but specifically NorCal. So the farm to table movement really hit its stride in Northern California. I mean, it didn't start here, but it actually started in Wisconsin. But it really, really hit its stride with Alice Waters and Chez Panisse. So the thing about that is it's super easy to do fresh, seasonal, and local in Northern California because we've had this 40-year-old tradition of farmers markets all over the landscape. So my philosophy is, why would I bother growing, paste tomatoes or whatever that you can get from professional growers who are very good at it every Saturday morning in a farmer's market? So what I do is, what don't they grow? What doesn't the supermarket have? Grow that. So typically it's going to be unusual herbs or unusual varieties. I grow lots and lots of chilies of all sorts of weird varieties and origins and shapes and heat levels and blah, blah, blah. And I grow tons of unusual herbs. So the point is, if you have a cuisine that you cook at home, whether it's Vietnamese or Mexican or Italian or whatever, grow the things that make that cuisine unusual and special, because chances are you're not going to be able to find those herbs or those particular ingredients in the farmer's market or the supermarket. So you have to grow them yourself.
In terms of a farmer's market, do you, and this is coming from an absolute amateur. I love farmers markets, but I don't necessarily know what I'm looking for when I go to them. Do you have these certain growers that you trust? Is that who you buy from, or do you search through the vegetables and the plants and sort of find it that way?
I always do a scope. I mean, I walk into the farmer's market and I walk the whole farmer's market before I buy anything. Because two reasons. One, you can bargain shop. Because sometimes somebody's selling fava beans for $2 a pound, and sometimes someone's selling it for $1 a pound or whatever. And the same basic fava beans. So go, choose your battle there. There are other cases where there'll be a new grower, and that person will have something new and unusual, or there'll be a case where I have bought from this grower in the past. In fact, that exists at the Orangevale or the Citrus Heights Farmers Market that I go to quite a bit. There are people, like there's a Greek lady who lives in Orangevale who does amazing honey. So I always buy from her. So it's kind of a combination.
I see. So in all the hunting, fishing, gardening, of all these wild foods that you use, do you have a favorite that you like to cook with?
Not really. I mean, it's because, every time if I were to say something, then the next thing in my head would be like, but there's this other thing. The cool thing about being in Northern California is that there is something going on every weekend of the year, which is super cool. I mean, it's why I'm here. I mean, I could live anywhere I want, but I choose to live here because you've got spring porcini, you've got morels, you've got fall porcini, you've got the winter mushrooms, you've got salmon, you've got okay deer hunting, you've got great duck hunting, you've got quail, you've got trout, you've got kokanee, you've got California halibut. I mean, I can go on and on and on. And more, I mean, you could create a calendar for the Sacramento region where, like, this week you should be doing this, or you should be picking this. And, loquats are all over the landscape and nobody eats them. But, so there's always something going on in Northern California in terms of wild food or feral food or whatever you want to call it that makes this place very special.
In terms of your recipes, how do you sort of come up with that? Is it a trial and error? Are you experimenting constantly? And then when you get it right, you sort of put it on your website, and your website has it feels like a million of them. Are you experimenting, or are you reading a lot of books about what to mix here and there? How did you compile this massive list of recipes?
One recipe at a time. Like I said, I've been doing it since 2007. So yeah, I mean, my recipes all come from experimentation. They come from reading. Like, I'm looking right now at a bookshelf of, 100 cookbooks, and that's just only one bookshelf in the house. So, I read widely, both in English and in Spanish. I travel. I come up with ideas that at least I think are original, which you can actually do with wild food, because unlike anything in the supermarket, I can pretty much guarantee you some combination of anything you buy in a supermarket has been done before, but that's not true with wild foods. So especially with wild things, I do quite a bit of experimentation. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm no longer in the business of posting my failures, because it's not really helpful. I mean, people like to see it because it's sort of voyeuristic and like, look, he's human too. Like, well, duh, of course I'm human. But I will tell you where I have, I'm just today, I'm writing a post about fish meatballs, like a Mexican fish meatball. And I tried that recipe 3 times before I got it right. And I will tell you, I tried this and it doesn't work. And so, but yeah, I'm not going to post something that isn't tested, that isn't delicious. And, there's a lot of recipes that are like, well, that was good, but it's not good enough for the site.
Are you the only test subject, or do you have some people that you trust that try out your food as you're experimenting?
Well, for a day in and day out, it's me and Holly.
Holly's your wife.
Holly Heiser does all the photos. She and I have been together for a zillion years. So yeah, we're the team. And when it comes to cookbooks, that's entirely different. So when it comes to cookbooks, all of those recipes are tested by actual normal humans, readers of the website. I say, hey, I need people to test X recipe. And that's different because when you hold a cookbook in your hand, if there's a mess up in it, that's not easy to fix. It is fixable, but it's not easy. Whereas if I miss something in a website, somebody will be like, hey, you say you have grated onions, where do those go? Like, oh, crap. And then you can fix the website. You can't do that with a book. So the book is much more heavily tested.
When compiling a cookbook, what's the most, obviously you want the recipe to taste good, right? You probably want, not maybe the average person, but the average, wild food aficionado to be able to complete it. But are you looking for something that looks good or tastes good or maybe a combination of the two? What's your thought process when creating something that specifically will go in these cookbooks?
Well, a lot of the cookbooks have recipes from the website, but it's usually somewhere about 60-40 new to stuff that's on the website. Because whenever I have a topic, like Hook, Line, and Supper is my latest book, and that has some fish recipes that were on the website, but it's one of those things where, like, how do you do a fish cookbook without, like, a fish sandwich? And I already had a really good recipe for a fish sandwich on the website, so it would be stupid to, like, reinvent the wheel. But the answer is always flavor. Flavor trumps everything. And it is true that I do want the average person to be able to do the dish, and you don't have to be a wild foods aficionado. So virtually substitutions of ingredients is extremely important to me. I will tell you exactly how X recipe is supposed to be done with the country of its origin or the state of its origin if it's a regional thing here in the United States. But then I'll tell you, okay, well, if you can't find this, which is likely, you're going to want to use X, Y, or Z, and that'll get you close. Because I really do want someone in like Weed or Arcata or somewhere like that to be able to do my recipes. I don't want you to have to be in the Sacramento region or any other big city for that matter to be able to do my recipes. And that, that matters a lot. And I mean, yes, flavor is always trumps the way it looks. But yeah, I mean, you do eat with your eyes. I mean, it could be as simple as one of the things that makes my food significant. That's not right. One of the things that makes my food distinctive is that I always use herbs. I always. It actually stems from the Julia Child. There's a lot of classical French food that doesn't look that great, so just sprinkle some parsley on it, and it immediately looks better because it has at least one other color in it. And I follow that rule, and it's not necessarily only with parsley, but color matters and plating matters, and which is why Holly and I spend a lot of time when we shoot the food so that it looks good enough where you want to make it.
That's a great point you made about, wild foods are different in different areas, right? So these cookbooks are like, can a person in Wisconsin, do you have sort of a substitute for them? Or is this a specific cookbook to just sort of this region, whether that be the West Coast or Northern California or what have you?
I don't write regional books.
Okay.
I mean, there's one that I might write someday, but no, it's crazy. It's stupid. Like, why would I write a book only for California?
Right. Yeah.
At least it's California because there's 30 some odd million people here. But yeah, no. I mean, every book I write is useful for everybody in the U.S., Canada, and really Mexico for that matter. And so, I spend a lot of time making sure of that. That's
really cool. Well, I'm a big fan of what you do, and I completely, this whole wild food. I'm glad we're sort of, as humans, seeing the terrible food industrial complex. I don't even know what you call it.
You can call it that.
Is that what you refer to it as?
You could totally call it that.
And we're seeing how not only are they just making bad products to consume, but they are also the treating of the animal. And I think, our relationship with animals and plants should be somewhat sacred. So I think what you're doing is awesome, and I commend you for it. What's your future look like? I know you just had this book out, so I know you're pretty concentrated on that, but is this your plan to continue to keep doing cookbooks and keep updating your website?
It is. I mean, I think I've got at least a few more books left in me, and for sure the website. I'm not. The cool thing about that is the website. You know, Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook is where I get to do whatever I feel like doing, and I can experiment. I can do recipes that are really esoteric if I want to, and it's like a playground, and so I don't feel like leaving that anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, I still have a few books left in me, and but this year is all about hook, line, and supper. That's great.
So where can people buy Hook, Line, and Supper?
Wherever fine books are sold. Yeah, I mean, literally, you could buy it at Copperfield's, and you could buy it in Barnes and Noble. You could buy it in Amazon. You can buy it from my website. You can buy it directly from Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook if you'd like. But pretty much wherever it is that you want to buy a book, you can get it.
And let's your website is, what's your website again? Sorry.
It's Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook, and the URL is huntgathercook.com.
And you have a podcast as well, right?
I do. It's called Hunt Gather Talk, and it's a seasonal podcast because it's kind of, I would be overwhelmed if I did, weekly podcasts the entire year. But the next season starts around Labor Day, and it's going to be entirely about fish and seafood.
Very cool. Well, I love what you do. I also, I told you I'm a millennial, so Hank's also got a really good Instagram. It's at Hunt Gather Cook on Instagram. Hank, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to following you and trying out some of your recipes here in the near future.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. See ya. All right. Big thanks to Hank for joining us on the podcast. Really awesome, unique dude. Like and you might have some stuff to say about it since you're the culinary guy, but
I liked his take on growing things at home that you cannot find in the local farmer's market or supermarket. I think that's great. It's a really, and I talked to you about this after the interview, but he mentioned different, different cuisines. People always usually have a cuisine that's their favorite, whether it be Italian or Mexican or Chinese or what have you. And as soon as he said that, I was like, I wonder what his is. But then I started to think about the episode of Meat Eater that I watched with him and just what he was saying and talking about growing all these different chilies. I could figure out pretty quickly that he's Mexican influenced.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just think it's cool of going out either hunting or fishing or working for your food and then creating these recipes behind it. I think that's super unique. It's funny. I actually learned about him because you were on Fox 40 doing your weekly interview, and then the next day he was on Fox 40. So that's how I learned about him, and I saw him and I was like, oh man, he's got a book. Let's see if he'll come on and promote it here. So
I was recruited to be on a show that involves hunting and fishing and then cooking your food. I turned that show down, but I have no doubt that they reached out to him as well.
Well, there's a problem there. One, you don't hunt.
Nope.
I wouldn't even know how to go about it.
I mean, I know how to shoot a gun, but I'm not a hunter.
Two, you're not the best fisherman.
Very true.
But
if I have a guide, I will catch a fish.
Yes. No, it'd be super fun to take a live animal and create a cuisine around it, I think.
That's what I loved about the show Meat Eater. I mean, I've been a fan of that show for years. I had to go back and we had to go find his episode on YouTube because it's a little older, but great episode, great dude, great interview. I'd love to try his cooking someday.
Yeah, he's got some events around here. I saw he had one for his book tour in Roseville, so maybe we'll head out to that. But just a super interesting guy. Go follow him on all of his, Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook. Go follow him on social media and stuff. He's got some really cool content. And I guess that does it for this episode of the Talking NorCal podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Go check out, we just did The Great Outdoors. Go check out our episode. We did a movie review of The Great Outdoors. starring John Candy and Dan Aykroyd. That was a lot of fun to go back and watch and sort of summer vibes, you know.
The audio quality was a little off, and I take full responsibility for that, but we're going to be tinkering around with new things, so that might happen again. So sorry if it sounds worse than this one, but might not be the last.
We're going to do less of these in studio and more over technology, so we might have some trial and error with our upcoming episodes, but
stick with us. The content will still be fire.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. With The Great Outdoor, we did it with one of those movie reviews because we didn't want to do it with like an interview and like mess up a solid interview like Hank Shaw. So, but go check that out. That just released a few days ago, and then. Yeah,
I have movie scenes from that popping up on my social media. Like, for some reason, social media knows that I just did the Great Outdoors podcast, because I've never seen a clip of that show on social media, and now it's like every time I jump on social media, it's a highlight of that movie. It's crazy.
Maybe it's just the time of year. Like, people are getting into their summer activities, and they're like, oh, let's go. And that's why I wanted to review it around this time, because that's a great movie, and it sort of just gets you into those summer outdoor vibes.
Summer vibes, baby.
Yes. So thank you for listening, and remember, stay active.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little mental when we visit Sacramento. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we partake in nature's bounty when we visit Humboldt County. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and me, I'm hella cool, 'cause I live in Sebastopol. We're NorCal, we're